Alright, without further ado, here is what I ordered. I ordered the MTS Technik coilover kit. This is the street version, and I ordered this off of their website directly. It comes from Poland. It's listed as €3.99 for the entire kit, and priced out with shipping and the value-added tax that they have over in Europe. It came out to €508 ship, which I think came out to approximately $570 US. Came right to the store, or sorry, right to the door. So without waiting any further, because I've been waiting for about a week and a half, 2 weeks now. They had 3 different versions. They had, I forget what they called it, but it was the standard, the street, and then I think it was sport. This one kind of gave you the middle ground on adjustability and firmness, from my understanding. So since my goal was to get or stay within stock parameters, I didn't need the extra adjustability that came from the additional kits. So inside, got this envelope. It looks like there's installation instructions in multiple languages. Looks like English, German, and Polish. There is a TÜV certification from Austria. And that's all TÜV, which is their agency that produces conformity standards, kind of like emission standards, but this is for all sorts of aspects of the vehicle, from brakes and anything that's performance modifying and can change or alter the vehicle's performance. Typically has that sort of qualifications. In the box, these are the MTS Technik Eibach springs. Looks like the number on them is GWFE06HA. That's 1. And 2. Now they did call it a coilover kit, but the rears are not coilover. They simply mount in the stock locations, which is what is required for my class. So these are the perches for the rear, and this would give you the right height adjustability in the rear. Looks like there's those 2, and then a plastic isolator. I believe in the instructions it says what you retain from the stock parts and what you replace. Alright, and there's the other side. These are the rear shocks. They come with flat washers, attachment nut, and the dust cover. So that's rear 1, rear 2, same thing, left. Here's the adjustment wrench. Presumably this just locks into the collar, allows you to rotate it more easily for adjustment while it's installed on the vehicle. Last but not least, the front struts. All nicely coated, really looking sharp. All the mounting points for the brake lines and ABS sensor wires and all of that, and the nut up top and rubber isolator. And the other side. thank goodness, is the first front one. Brackets, attachment points, adjustment collar for height, there's a little rubber bumper, and two-stage spring in front. Alright, that's all that comes in the box. These manuals and tube documentation, that all came to me in email when I ordered. Well, the tube stuff did, and then the manuals with the instructions and torque specifications for all the nuts, that is online on their website. And then to complement this upgrade, I'll be replacing the rear mounting bracket, both sides, and then the front. So I'll have new bearings and isolators front and rear. And that is all that we're going to be installing today. Let's get to it. Alright, so going to be tackling the front first. Here's the supplied parts, the necessary bolts, and then it suggests here that you're going to be reusing the stock component for the mount with the bearing, which I said I have a replacement for. So let's get started. I'm going to pull the wheel off now. We'll pop the hood, and then we'll thoroughly lubricate any of the sure to be rusted bolts. Alright, so in the future, probably when I go to the new tires and wheels, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up replacing the 4 wheel bearings, front and rear. So with that, I'm likely going to go to a stud conversion just for ease of swapping out tires, and I think I just like that configuration better. These are like a conical bolt, probably M12 by 1.5. Alright, let's spray down all these bolts and get to it. Looks like we have 3 bolts holding us on the bottom. Will be the 2 here, and the 1 here. I don't actually have anything attached here, so this will be for something auxiliary. You can see it pretty good. A couple of reasons I suspected the struts were bad. As you can see, there's some run marks. They're still a little bit light in color. They're still a little bit wet. And then there's some pooling going on the inside of the wheel. And it could be either your strut's leaking or your brake fluid. And in this case, my brakes are firm. And everything around the brake calipers and everything is dry, so something to look for. I just saw that when I was underneath looking for what I needed for the transmission. One thing I am noticing here is I might have lost a sticky wheel weight, which may explain some of the shuttering going on the steering wheel. Alright, turns out like it was 18. Don't have an impact socket for that, so it's going to be a makeshift breaker bar here. See how this works. Red locker. That explains a little bit of that. So these two bolts in the bottom and the one on the top here that I showed you all go into the spindle. Now, the instructions in the manual say to remove your brake caliper, probably just to get the rotor and stuff out of the way, but I'm going to try and do it without, because everything stays attached to that via the steering rack and then also the lower ball joint. So I'm going to go ahead and try and do that without removing all that. Who likes extra work? Put that tire there. I need a deep well 18 for that. I'm going to go ahead and remove the ABS sensor on this side. Looks like it might get a little bit easier that way to remove the strut. On the other side, there's also a wear sensor on the caliper. It's the HW5. And I'm going to give it a little wiggle. If it doesn't wiggle with it, then I'm just going to leave her. I ain't trying to break that plastic. Something that I've noticed on all the plastic of this 1998 is that it's all brittle. And that is staying in there. Check. There seems to be enough little play in here. You should be able to get it around either end of the strut. Alright, so that's the two lower bolts out. Now I just got to get that top one, which I'm going to need a deep well 18mm for that. Unless I can get the head. I'll try the head first. Alright, moving on to the top three. I can't get an 18 deep well at the moment. These are 13s. Alright, we're going to try my friend leverage here one more time. Now I got an extension on there, I can get it a little bit easier. Sorry, I keep giving you guys my backside. Hope you get the best angle. Not showing you what you want. Let's get up in there. That wasn't pleasant. No, it's not thread locked. Locking nut. Try baby Thor. There she go. That's all she needed. See what happens when we take this guy off. Attach it to the top. Figure out how to separate everything. I took this ball joint separator and just wedged it right here between the two lower bolts straddling the locating bolt or stud, and then it split right open. Alright, supplied with the kit. This washer on the top of the assembly, this lock nut. Now, in here, in the instruction set, it's not abundantly clear which order of components we have stacked up here into the isolator. I see a small silver gap there, so it looks like the washer is between this top plate and the absorber, which makes sense because the bearing in the absorber here is recessed from this outer edge, so you probably don't want this contacting the top plate. So I'm going to put the washer between this top plate and the isolator like so. Press down on that and then put the nut over that. In order to do this, I did loosen up this collar and put it on its very lowest setting just so I can press that into the fitting. Now the instructions say that this is tightened to 35 Newton meters. Alright, for now, I just tightened the bolt. It's not to spec. We'll do that once I get it up into the wheel well here. So we're going to start by reattaching everything now. Alright, I'm going to do this differently. I'm going to open to the strut tower first, and then we'll worry about getting it all aligned here. Another thing I'll point out while doing this, the old strut top, very crunchy. Definitely got flat spots in the race, the bearing race. So that should improve the steering feel a little bit. Alright, so what I'm doing now is I'm adjusting this lower collar to set the right height. I'm going to start with stock height. By that I mean I took the measurement from the strut tower down to the mounting bolts down here. I'm going to try to set that same height, knowing that these probably won't compress as much as the worn out springs, so we'll start with that as our 0 point, and from there we'll let the car down, let it settle, drive a little bit, and readjust as required. Alright, we got the two front struts installed. So as I mentioned, I set the initial height to 5.4 centimeters from that bracket to the bottom of the spring perch, just as a starting point, because I really don't know how much these are going to compress. And in order to get to the same length as the original, it was like 2 more inches of adjustment, which I didn't see happening, so it's got to be something in between. So we're going to start with that. One thing I did notice, the tire is rubbing on these fronts. Hopefully when I let it down here, we'll see in a second, the geometry changes enough. Otherwise I'm probably going to be looking at spacers until the new wheels get here, and then I'll have to reassess that situation. Alright, moving on to the rears. We've got a separate perch for the spring and shock absorber, 1 bolt down to the rear trailing arm for that shock absorber up into here. And we're going to replace that isolator in order to get to the top side of that. Can't see it right now. It's behind this carpet here in the back. Oh, that was useless. Alright, we'll see that later. And then there's a set of instruction, a small set of instruction I would call it, for telling you what you're going to replace on here. I think we keep one of these isolators, top or bottom, I don't recall which. And this one should be pretty straightforward. We'll see. Alright, first thing we're going to do is going to remove the top of the shock absorber mount, which is inside the back of the car. Support of the rear trailing arm underneath. Beware, there is a brake line just back behind this, so make sure you're placing that in a place that's not going to cause problems for you later. So inside here, now that I've got the cover removed back here, you can see, oops, that is the top of the shock mount. It's the same 13mm that was used on the front shock towers. We'll leave that on for now. Alright, ended up having to take this little rubber boot off the top of the inside. Apparently that's what was holding it in. I removed the lower bolt, that was an 18mm quick impact wrench, and the whole thing pretty much just fell out. Looks like there might be a bushing receiver that I gotta retain, or maybe press out of this one. I gotta take a look at the other one. And nope, the new one does come with a sleeve already, so it's all good to go. Nut, nothing bolts. And that'll go on the top there with the new isolator. Like the new isolator came with one washer, but the kit already comes with, oh, it just comes with the one. Alright, so that's the bottom one, and then the isolator came with a new top one. And I'll just sandwich that. I'm going to wait to cut that until I have it bolted to the car, so that way when it the gas pressure pushes back, it'll push it up into the isolator in position. Otherwise it might be hard to reinstall that. Alright, we should be able to lower this a little bit. The manual does say to remove the rear CV shaft from the differential to allow for more play, I'm guessing, but I'm just gonna try it without first and see how far we get. Because this new spring shouldn't require as much, and if this one's compressed, hopefully it just falls right out. We get enough play in the system already. Alright, got stops there. Lower it a little bit more. Oh, it's the sway bar. Let's remove that. Reposition so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm just taking a small bolt, 13mm off the bottom of the sway bar mounting bracket. And that'll hopefully release this rear trailing arm. Because right now the sway bar is trying to hold it up at the same position as the other side. Careful, there is a brake line here. Don't want to nick that. Alright, that all looks loose. Let's lower the control arm a little more. Rear spring is out. 2 isolators, top and bottom. Clean that up a little bit. Alright, according to this, we want to use the original upper spring bushing. That's now going to the bottom of the new one. Wish I'd known that, I probably would have purchased a replacement. And then the collar simply installs on the upper. Take all the adjustment out of that. And adjust back up. ready this back into position. Make sure that goes back in its hole. Alright, that should be it right there. Alright, now the shock absorber back in. Alright, the next issue we've got, there's a little play, because this bolt bottoms out into this blind hole, because of on the old shock absorber, it had a shouldered sleeve that went out a little bit further than what's on the new replacement one. So one of two things, I can try pushing this out to reuse it, or go get a couple thick fender washers to place on either side of this one here, which I think is probably what I'm going to end up doing. Alright, retighten the bolt for the strut inside the body there. It was a 17 millimeter for the nut, and then I used a 1/4 inch to hold the little nipple tight so you can get it tightened down without spinning. And then, yeah, that's where we are now. Everything's installed and tight, and we'll release this side, install the tire, and then install the other side, and from there we'll make some adjustments. Alright, I'm here trying to make my first adjustment, and the issue I'm having is as I rotate the adjustment collar, this whole section with the thread on it is also rotating, so it's not actually changing. This collar isn't actually moving on the threads at all, so if I can't figure out a way to hold that, which I tried a C-clamp, I tried a wood clamp, I tried channel locks on that already, I can't get a good hold on it. I may just have to disconnect the shock again and fully unload this to adjust it. Alright everyone, it looks like I had some misconceptions about where the ride height is measured from on this vehicle. I was having some trouble yesterday wrapping my mind around it because I was almost fully adjusted on the front, and I was just around, by my calculations, what the nominal ride height should be based on the numbers in the book, and then I couldn't even get within 10 centimeters of what it should be in the rear. So I found some extra content on some forums with some pictorials from a Bentley manual showing where the measurements are taken. And now that I look at it, it does make more sense. So on the front, you measure from the top of the fender. So in the picture, they have a ruler coming off of this, and then you measure down to the bottom of the rim lip. And then in the rear, you're measuring from the fender to the bottom of the wheel here. And I guess that makes sense now that I think of it, because that takes the height of the tires out of the equation. So whether they're inflated or underinflated, that'll take that out of the measurement. And then on this car, because visually the top of the fender is integrated into the hood, varying heights of hood bumpers can change your ride height numbers. So measuring it from the solid part of the car obviously makes more sense that way. So I'm going to remeasure everything, and then I'm going to have to get under and make some adjustments. All right, now that I measured the appropriate locations, I'm not too far off from where I should be in the front, and pretty close in the rear as well, which I'm probably going to just end up leaving because I'll just wait till I get the new wheels and tires set up in there. So in the front, I've got 644 millimeters on the left and 639 on the right, with a target of 645. And as long as I'm within 10 millimeters or 1 centimeter, according to the manual, I'll be good. I will go ahead and change the right side to match the left a little bit closer. I'm about 5 millimeters off. And then in the rear, I measured 557 millimeters on both sides with a target of 563. So I'm actually a little bit low in the rear, and I will make that adjustment with the new wheels and tires. All right, a bit of a recap on the installation of my MTS coilover spring set, the streets. To start, take your measurements by the book. The manual does suggest weight parameters for both left seat, right seat, trunk, and a fuel gas tank to make sure that the car is properly weighted. And if you do that before and after, you get the right numbers. Also, within regards to the numbers, measure the proper locations as depicted, as I had shown earlier in the video, because it'll change your numbers quite drastically, especially in the rear. And that also compensates for or rules out any fluctuations in the tires, and sidewall height of the tires. And for the front, the variation that could occur from different height adjustments in the hood. In the front, fitment wise, at stock height, I do have approximately 2 millimeters clearance on my 16x7 wheel with a 225 50 R16 tire on it. So that is a bit close. I would consider maybe going with some wheel spacers to bring those out if I was going to continue with these tires, but I'm not. The new tires that are going to be here are going to be mounted on a 17 by 7.5 wheel. The tread width of the tire is going to be the same, so it's a 225/45 R17. And what that's going to do is it's going to stretch the same width of tire over more wheel, and then with an additional offset that's built into that, or it's not really built into the different offset of the new wheel is going to bring the whole rim further outboard. So actually, with the new tire and wheel configuration, I'll have another 1.25 mil clearance to that spring. Now, so this is all stock height. I think once you actually lower it more, if that's what your goal is, you might gain a little more clearance on that. And then in the rear, the installation of that shock with the bolt in the bottom that was too long into that blind hole, I ended up just going to Ace Hardware and picking up the same bolt, but 10 millimeters shorter. So the original is 70 millimeters long, so I purchased a 60 millimeter long bolt, and then I did forego the washers on either side. I just didn't like the fitment of the washers to the bolt head. There's a bit of play in there, and I didn't want it to slide off to one side and potentially pinch the rubber bushing into the bottom of the shock. Initial perceptions of the ride, very stiff, but this is also in comparison to blown out suspension all around, so I can't say definitively whether this is I mean, I could say it's much different than what was on the vehicle, but a comparison to the stock suspension is not, doesn't have any value because I don't know what that is. But yeah, so corner's very level. The shocks feel really good now. It doesn't feel all floppy over the road. Once I get a little more space between the shock and the tire on the front, I'll go do a bit more aggressive driving and see how it corners. But for the time being, I'm a little worried about it rubbing on the shock potentially in a steeper turn. So those are kind of my takeaways of the installation of the kit. In my opinion, there could have been a little bit better instruction, but it is what it is. It tells you at least what to retain.